hands right now to just make sure everybody's really beautifully detangled. And I've taken out the perimeter of her hair here, and that's where I'm gonna start working. So I like to start working perimeter in. One thing that's really important to note is that while I was going through her hair and I was looking at those varying lengths, I'm keeping that in the back of my mind because I really wanna factor that in as I'm sort of setting this perimeter base. It's very common that in the crown of the head, people with textured hair oftentimes have this unique area of breakage, right? If you think about this, this is where the bulk of, like if you're in the shower, this is where the water hits. If you're walking around, the sun is beating down on this. A lot of us wear our hair in poofs and ponytails. This is where it all is. So it gets really dry, and a lot of times they have breakage from wearing it like that, right? So I always keep that length in mind because I'm gonna need to marry the front and the back together, right? I don't wanna have a disconnect. I love a beautiful, like architectural, cool, disconnected cut, but right here now, that's not what I'm aiming for. I need to create softness and fullness so that her hair looks beautiful at all angles. That's one thing that I see a lot with curly cuts online is I hate to call them camera tricks, but it's very strategic camera angles that are used to make the hair look a certain way. But if you were to walk past that person and see them from a different angle, their hair would not look full, right? And you probably have seen some of those photos yourself, but oftentimes they're sort of leaning forward into the camera. The hair is parted deeply, deeply in the back and everything is pushed forward. So that way they look very, very full, right? But if you saw that gal from the back, it would be, there's nothing in the back. It's just parted down the back, right? So keep that in mind too. I want something that's realistic, not just editorial, right? Because they have to live in this hair. So I'm just gonna go in, and our back, in this case, she's got a very long tail, which is also really common, especially when looked against these sort of swing line areas, right?
Do you mind
as we
turning
come through.
her around?
I'm sorry?
Do you mind turning her
Sure,
around?
no, that's easy peasy. You guys able to see that, right? So.
Do you guys like me to turn the lights off so you can see the screen better, or is this fine?
Is this okay? Cool. And it's nice to also show them this. I have my salon painted white, not just because I like white, but also because it's much easier to see the hair. And I always show them, like, look at your hair, right? And I'll take pictures of the back of their head for them before I ever start cutting anything, because I want them to see what their head looks like from the back. 99% of the time, they have not got any idea what their head looks like from the back. So that also helps them to understand, like, oh, there's a very clear point at which my hair is not happy, right? And again, as I come around, if I look at this same 1.5 to 2 inch perimeter, when I get up here, there's nothing, right? So I have a big gap. So in thinking about the haircut that I want to deliver, I also am factoring in how am I going to strategically camouflage these areas so that she's not going to be as inclined to be moving things around to hide them. Because that also happens. People, when they end up with traction alopecia, are oftentimes trying to like scoot stuff around or strategically hide it, but they end up over manipulating their hair as a result of that. So my goal is like, how do we give this some coverage so that we can hopefully give these babies a chance to, if there's any fight left in that follicle, let's leave it alone, right? And so that's what I'm keeping in mind as I come around to the front. Also, I basically have no bang to work with. I have no front. There's this whole triangle. There's just this, right? So in thinking about that, also, I'm going to be really strategic because I'm going to need to move some hair from somewhere else to this area at some point so that it doesn't look sparse, right? And again, all really common things that I'm seeing. So if I look at this hair, I'm just going in and first setting that base. And then I always come back once I've cut and I'm feeling a section, because it's very common that after I feel things, extra little babies are gonna pop out. So I'll come back around and dust it again. So that way I know that if some of those curls were kind of stuck up in that curl pattern, I've given them the chance to wiggle out. I recently started offering express cuts, so dry cuts only, but I am only offering them for my existing clients and for those that have had a haircut less than 4 months ago. Because if it's longer than that, I need to really be able to see the hair dry, wet, dry again, right? Because, but if there's somebody who I'm like, I'm seeing you once every 3 months, there are no surprises. We know we have universal health all over. I can get away with them coming in, dry cutting, fluffing, moving it around and making sure it's good, and then sending them on their way in an hour. But I really had to work for years before I had sort of a stable of people that were at that point, right? So as I come around here, I want to make sure I'm preserving as much length as I can, because I know that these areas are sparse. And again, I'm really feeling, where do things start to feel angry, right?
What is, when
I
say
say angry,
Yeah.
and when I say angry, what that usually amounts to are what we refer to as single strand knots. And I, in dealing with straight hair, if I had, if I just dealt with straight hair, I probably wouldn't be as familiar with single strand knots. But in dealing with textured hair, that's like the bane of our existence, right? Yes. So single strand knots happen at the end of hair, usually in the last 2 inches, and they are exactly what they sound like. The hair will knot on itself, and oftentimes that acts like Velcro. So that little knot will hook onto oftentimes healthy hair next to it, and then catches there, and then you get breakage, and then it catches there. So you end up with exponentially more hurt than you would if you just got like a regular haircut. And when I say a regular haircut, I mean every 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, right? These single strand knots, I always tell people, those are your indicator that you need to come in and see me. Did you see how easy it was for me to part that versus this? Versus, right? So that's the kind of feel that I'm going for, is I want to be able to freely move through everything. Oh, I love this song so much. I can hear it bumping in the background.
Kia, aside from having done thousands of curly haircuts, where have you also gotten education from?
Yeah, I wish I could say that there were a lot of people that I could go to get education, but a lot of the times it's few and far between. I did, when I first came out of school, I took the introductory course with Diva Curl because they were really sort of industry leaders in the space, and I also knew that on their website they had a stylist finder. And I used to work in marketing and branding, right? So I was like, cool, they're getting 40,000 hits a month, so this is a return on investment thing, right? Like I take this class, I'm on their website, that way when people look for a stylist, I'm gonna be on there. Do I have to cut using their styling techniques? Maybe I'm gonna like it, maybe I'm not, There was some, how do I say this? In taking that class, I found that a lot of the classes, and it kind of held true over time, but most classes on curly hair are on a doll, or a lot of them are on a doll head. And a lot of the time the doll head is, it's a doll with straight hair which has been permed. Were you? You were just talking about that? Yeah. So doing a curly haircut on a uniform curl pattern that was essentially straight doll hair that got put on perm rods is going to be really different than doing something like this. So we all know, yeah, you take a class and cool, you've got an introduction to that, but are you an expert in it? No, you're gonna have to go home and now do some demo models and test it out and kind of trial run stuff. I think that people are getting sent home from a lot of curl cutting classes with effectively no practical at all. Because oftentimes in these classes, they're not even cutting a live model. It's just all doll head work. And because their intent, and if you see as I come around, right, I only have 2 curl groupings to work with, right? But still, I'm following the same, right? Because I still want to have the same shape. I'm just working with what I got. Up here, very little, right? I have very little to work with, but I'm working with what I got.
As far as elevation goes?
Yes. I like to work generally, for the most part, aim for 90-degree angles coming out of the head if I'm doing a cut like this where I know I need maximum coverage. Of course, that is going to change if I am creating a different shape for a client, but I find that 95% of the time when I'm working with somebody for the first time, our aim is not to create an avant-garde look, right? We are at the foundation. We need to get them to a healthy hair place. And once we get to a healthy hair place, then we can start thinking about styling and yada, 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 right? Because if I send her out with a unique cut that requires some work on her part, she just said, I'd be so mad, right? But that's essentially what's happening is people are getting sent home with hairstyles that they cannot execute on. And then, again, they're being made to feel bad that they can't execute on it. It's like, can't do that, y'all. But yeah, when people come in, sometimes they have a very clear idea of what they want to look like at the end. On my intake form, I do ask, do you have an idea of the shape you're going for? If they do, cool, that gives me at least a place to start from during the consultation so we can pull it up and talk about that together. That will bring up other issues, like the fact that 90% of the time, their idea of what they want to look like is not what they have. But not their fault because they don't even know what they have, right? How would they know what they've got? So how would they know what their hair can do? I took down this next section in the nape. And how much I take is going to be dictated by how much I can see through the hair, right? If I start to not be able to see what's going on, then I'm going to be like, oh, okay, that's too thick, right? And sometimes my section is going to be dictated by how much hair I can physically manipulate, right? One thing we can kind of see here, I'm not sure if the camera can take a peek at it, but here in the interior, we also have something similar where she's got a lot of thickness here at the root, and then things really fall off. So I actually can feel a fall off here. There's another fall off here. There's a fall off here. And then there's another fall off out here. So again, very, very common when folks are doing braiding for them to have sometimes like inch-long little stubs on the interior of their hair. When we had talked before, you were saying like, oh, I want to do something shorter, right? Yeah. Which is so cool because now I don't have to have the like, oh gosh, she's really wedded to like keeping every inch of hair on her head, even if it's at the expense of it being healthy hair, right?
I'm trying to have it all be healthy. I don't want just parts and sections of it healthy. I want it to go out and be full.
That's my dream.
We have a question over here.
Yeah.
My question was actually along the lines of what you were going into. Do you find like putting the importance of building that trust over like cutting what's needed? Like you need 3 inches,
Yeah.
but I don't want to re-traumatize you, so
Sometimes I've got to not cut what I need. It's a really hard line to walk because it's like your professional integrity, right? It's what you're sending out into the world, and you don't want to be like, well, I sent out this half-assed haircut into the world. But again, I think that if you shift the way that conversation goes, so that it is, hey, here's a realistic expectation of what we're going to see at the end of the day. You and I both know that this area has X amount left to go. You've articulated that you're not really comfortable saying goodbye to that today, and that's cool, but let's develop a game plan. That's what I always call it. I always say, like, do we agree on our game plan? Do you feel comfortable before I touch anything? And unless they have like a super engaged, resounding, yeah, I totally feel comfortable with that game plan, we still have more talking to do. And sometimes people out of discomfort will say they are like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I should never cut past my second knuckle, I'm sorry, I'm the worst. But sometimes folks will say they're comfortable just to like get out of a conversation, but I'm like, no, no, no. We really need to like be on the same page about this. And I will show them, you know, again, I will take pictures, I will part their hair, I will say like, do you see this? I am cutting to right here. Reach up with your hand and feel this for me. Are you okay with this not being here? Like, I'm very physical with them, because that way, again, and I also, you know, I cut them dry and facing the mirror, so they're not surprised. I know that some folks cut, you know, with a client away to them, you know, so they can get a big reveal, but please don't do that with, I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm not even gonna be a diplomat on that one, just please don't do that with our hair, because odds are we're terrified. Like genuinely terrified. And when I say terrified, I mean not just terrified you're gonna get a jacked up haircut, but terrified you're gonna go back to work and lose your job. Terrified your boyfriend's gonna break up with you. Terrified your grandmother is gonna disown you. Terrified. Terrified, right? So to Camille's question, if it's a, do I leave this extra on so she's not terrified? It's a yes. I do leave it on, but I also say, okay, you and I both agree you have to be back here in X amount of time, and you have to be using this product that I'm advocating for you, right? Like, you need to be doing the following, and otherwise, next time I see you, we're gonna be right back here. So again, bringing it back to, I'm not trying to waste your time. I'm trying to make this as efficient for you as possible. Granted, I know that I am making it as easy for me as possible, but I think that these can be mutually beneficial relationships. I don't think that it has to be like us taking advantage of people or them getting over on us. I think we can be paid a fair wage to do this work, and they can receive a service that they walk away going like, yeah, that was fair. You know, like, she was with me, she gave me something that is great and that nobody else had given me, and I feel good about the money that I'm paying. I think that that's a really big component too, because I've definitely worked with a lot of people who have paid 2, 3, 4 times what my haircut cost is to have an experience where they did not feel listened to. They oftentimes are flying across the country or across the globe for haircuts. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is sometimes you will get pushback about rates, but I also like to emphasize, like, if somebody's last haircut, they flew down to LA, they got a hotel room, they paid $500 for a haircut, and they got food for 2 days, do not let them give you a hard time about what you are charging to sit for 3 hours with them, right? And that, I actually hear that story a lot. That's a lot of folks. Their last haircut, they flew to get that haircut. Again, because there are so few people that are doing the work, that these sort of like celebs emerge. Can you see this hole? This is already broken off right here. So I have this V. But the cool thing is that where it's broken off is actually matching up with my last layer down here. So again, you're always, you have to be very engaged at all times, because these cuts you really do have to rely on instinct in a different way, right? Because you may get in there and be like, oh, that's a surprise. I didn't see that before, or I didn't know that was going on when I started, right? So that's why it's extra important to, like, when you're doing that, you know, so I'll consult first, and then I say, do you mind if I touch your hair? And then I'll spend another 4 or 5 minutes while they're talking about products and stuff. I'll just be moving around and trying to get as much intel as I possibly can. I like to think of it a lot like the rings of a tree, right? Where I'm like, I need to get in there and see, like, you know, when we look at like the ice caps, you know, like they'll take like a tube and they can see like what's been happening over the years, or like a volcano exploded 700 years ago. I feel like that with curly hair, right? And sometimes, you know, you ask folks their hair history, and I do hear people say a lot of the time, like, everything was good until I did X. Or I got a bad haircut and it just never went back. I hear that a lot, and then I have to tell them that, like, a haircut can't change the texture of your hair, right? I also hear everything was fine until I was like 13 or in high school or junior high, and I go like, that's just puberty. So they don't understand that our texture is so heavily influenced, not only texture, but hair health, puberty, hormonal changes, medication. Postpartum hair loss is something that is not discussed to the degree that it needs to be discussed. I am heartbroken every time I've got clients that are like, my hair is falling out. I just had a baby. My doctor did not discuss this with me. And yeah, I see it all the time. Here you go, babe. You're welcome.
Question.
Yeah.
I see you're cutting straight. Obviously, you're trying to build
Yes.
with her. But, is there ever a time that you try to create space in the ends?
No. Not with tighter textures like this. If I create space in the ends, it's going to look diffuse. And that means that it's going to look sparse at the ends, which means that they're going to look like they have not only less hair on their head, but also if they're wearing their hair in a wash and go or a hydrate and style, whatever we want to call it, if they're wearing their hair in its natural pattern, when you get to that end, it's going to fuzz out, right? Because if you think about it, you've got that curl pattern, and this is where the danger comes in kind of willy-nilly cutting curls with a razor or texturizing. You have to be very, very conscientious, because if you think of this curl pattern, if I'm not cutting it right at the end of that curl segment, right? Cut, cut. If I'm starting these curls, because this hair bends, these waves at the end, you're just going to get them splayed out along that circle, right? So instead of it coming to fruition, it's going to go. So their hair isn't going to look finished. So it'll be that like that, and that's something that I hear a lot too. People will be, they're like, my wash and go started to look like really bad or really fuzzy, and I know I'm doing everything right. And I'm like, that's because your ends are shot. Like, you could use great products, but if your hair needs to get cut. And it's that same feeling where things start to feel very coarse at the ends if I were to do that. Now, I do have like a couple gals that have silkier, finer, much looser hair that wear their hair in like a tapered cut. So they need more volume on the top because they don't have this kind of texture where it's gonna actually give them height, but they want that look of having more height at the top. So in that case, yes, I am going to go in and do some variance in length so that there's something to buttress that. So you've got little stacks going on in the interior, but with this, I would not. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and the last thing you just said about creating that body, you do that on the interior, not on the exterior.
I do it on the interior, exactly, because I never want the hair to look hollow on the ends. Usually I have a lot more leeway in the interior, right? Like I would have to take out a lot more in here. And also keeping in mind, like, it becomes impossible to cut along that guide next time if you start doing that stuff. There was a video that was on, you know, like, it was probably Salon Centric or something like that not too long ago. And I don't know if any of you saw it, but like people were freaking out because they were using this technique, this texturizing technique where they would part the hair upon a fine line and then they would take a microfine. Did you see that? Did it give anybody else like the worst anxiety on the planet? So that's what I equate. It would be like trying to chase down, like, how am I gonna find what I did last time? You know, like if I start doing too much. So again, if I have, like, I think of this one client that I have, and there are specific curls that I use in the interior to buttress, and that way I know where they are because we built a program together, right? But with this density of hair, if I tried to do that, I wouldn't be able to see the forest for the trees. Yeah, I would just be spoop out of luck. Now, as I start moving up into the round of the head, that's oftentimes, I wasn't making that sound about you.
Okay, I'm very used to it, so it's okay.
No, I was making it about my own fingers doing a weird thing. So as I move into the interior of the head, expect that you're gonna get more resistance from these ends, right? Because they tend to be, we're moving into that hyper dry zone, yeah? I wanna be careful with the tension that I'm putting when I cut back here. I don't wanna be pulling anything too taut because it's very common for this hair to have more recoil than the hair in the perimeter. So I wanna make sure that I'm not going excessively in this area because remember, I'm gonna wash it, condition it, dry it. I'm gonna see it after. If I still need to take off more, I can, right? So I'm gonna be slightly more conservative as I start to move up. And I'm looking at where I was, and I feel that distinct fall off. I can literally feel my fingers going. 25, 30, 40, 50 unused, half-used bottles in their bathroom. And that's not fun. Guilty?
For sure.
Or do you have the product graveyard? Yes. That's okay. That's most people. And one thing that I will tell clients is I actually invite them to, I say, you know, if you have a product graveyard, you can actually send me photos of the products that you've got, and then I can pretty easily tell you, like, keep it, toss it. Keep it, toss it. And that's what I'll tell them. Like, put them all on the counter, and if there's anything worth keeping, I'll tell you. Because sometimes they do have a decent product in their arsenal. They've been using it incorrectly. And I think that as it relates to this Diva Curl thing that I was talking about earlier, I think that there's a lot of user error that takes place, not only with them, but with so many of these lines, especially those that are no poo focused.
What do you use in your hair?
So in my hair, I use, I dig your hair for my cleanser and my conditioner. And for my styler, I use AG Naturals Cloud Foam. But also, I would say probably half the week, I'm not using anything in my hair. So I'm just washing, conditioning, and then just letting my hair be out. Not all of my clients would feel comfortable with the way that their hair lays with no product. So that's not something that I would say to everybody, like, you can just go and wear nothing, right? But for me, I feel comfortable. Sure, my hair does not have the definition that you see today, but I also don't feel like I need that all of the time. And a lot of days, like, I just want to, you know, if I have a day off and I'm washing my hair, I will just wash my hair and condition my hair and then just let my hair air dry. Then the next day, I say I have work, I will wake up, wet my hair down completely again, and then I might go in with just conditioner and recondition it, then put on my styling product and go, right? So I have a lot of flexibility in how I choose to style or not style my hair, or how much effort I want to put in, if it's 5 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, right? So like today, I live in San Jose. I got up at 6, had some coffee, I took a shower and washed, conditioned, and styled my hair. And that took about 25 minutes to do that. And I will be able to wake up tomorrow and just fluff my hair. The next day, I'll probably just fluff my hair. I might put it in a poof. But usually my aim for me at this time of the year, I want to be able to comfortably get like at least 3 and up to 5 days out of every wash. But that's just me.
Do you wrap your hair at night?
I don't.
I'm sorry, the question was, do you wrap your
Do
hair?
you wrap your hair at night? Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one that I get in the salon a ton. I don't wrap my hair because with my hair texture, if I were to wrap things, they would effectively collapse. I don't have this degree of volume. And some of you, if you follow me, you may have seen my hair looks like wet, but like my hair, even when I got here today, like I don't have that much hair on my head. I have a lot of different patterns of hair on my head, so it gives the illusion of fullness. But if I go to sleep and I wake up, I look like The Weeknd had a baby with Kid and Play. Like it is just like full on, like it is, whew, it's a very unique look. But even with that being said, if I use the right method of refreshing my hair, I can fluff that out and still get time out of it, even if my hair is a little bit squeezed. But a lot of that has to do with how healthy my hair is and how well hydrated it is, and also the products that I'm using. So the AG foam that I use to style my hair, one of the reasons I like it is it gives a lot of elasticity so that I can touch my hair and that I can sleep on it, right? And wake up and know, okay, cool, I can move this around and it's not the end of the world. But some of the products that are very popular on the market form an incredibly hard film. And I find that with those, you don't have much wiggle room. There's very little flexibility as it relates to like restyling. And if you look up restyling on something like YouTube, bless, but it's usually like a lot of people just redoing their hair every day. And to me, restyling my hair is like, I want to spend 3 minutes restyling my hair. I don't want to re-wet my hair and redo my hair every day. I don't have time for that. But when it comes to textured hair, most of the restyling videos that you'll see on YouTube will be that. It's literally just redoing their hair every day.
Kia, when you're pulling down sections, are you cutting to a guide or are you just cutting it visually?
So I am cutting to a guide. I'm always taking a very small section, right, from the previous area that I've cut. If you think of it, similar to a one-length haircut, right, that's effectively what I'm doing in today's case. Granted, like I talked about earlier, it's going to be a different haircut all the time. But in today's case, it is going to effectively be like an equidistant one-length cut where I'm essentially pulling out at 90 degrees from everywhere, right? That wouldn't necessarily be the case for everyone, but since we're working through this damage, that's what I'm doing. But like up here, right? So even if I say, here's my guide from my previous section, right?
We have a question from the live streamers.
Ooh, I love that. Can you guys see the, I don't know.
This is Andrea, and she says, how do you change the conversation with your client that you have been having with them for years about how to care for their curls? Example, we have been preaching co-wash or no wash only because that has been what we have been told.
I think that's a great question. I appreciate that question. I think that the best thing you can do is to be forthcoming and say, you know what, over the course of time, we have come to see that it's not performing in the way that we like. And so we started doing some experimenting on our side. And we have a new process that we feel is going to be more effective for you. And I've done that too, where I, have used products that I go like, you know what, something's different and I don't feel like I like using this anymore. I don't want to advocate for it. And I'm very upfront with people. I just say like, you know what, this is what I was telling you before because this is the best thing that I know, but I've gone out and gotten additional, education for myself because I think it's important to always be learning. So in doing this, I've found there's actually a better way. And now I want to teach you that better way. I think that's the best way you can frame it because, just be honest. People are much more apt to trust somebody who says, you know what, my bad, than somebody who continues or just omits it from the conversation is like, now we're going to do this. I'm not going to talk about it. Like, be upfront about it, and, sadly, it's a lot of what we see on like YouTube is kind of a different like storyline all of the time. Do this to get this, and then 6 months later, do this to get this. And nobody can keep up with it, and then they lose trust in who they're getting information from. I always say that yes, I sell retail, but it is not my primary focus. I believe that people will trust me if what I advocate for works. That's where I'm coming from. So if you like what I do and it works, and you go home and you feel like my hair feels a lot better, then I don't need to tell you to buy products. You're gonna come in and be like, I gotta get this, it worked. So again, I think my 4 months at the Disney store in high school is like, that's the most sales I've ever been comfortable with. And I was really bad at it. It's so funny. I used to just go in the back of the store, because at Disney stores, they have that area with all stuffed animals, and it's called Plush Mountain. And they used to laugh at me because I loved just organizing Plush Mountain. And I'm like, this is basically what I do. It's like, I just organize. They're like, it's so even. I'm like, mm-hmm. They're like, we need you to sell more Ariel wigs. I was like, no, I just want to organize Plush Mountain. And out here, I don't know if you guys can see, we have some hairs that are effectively completely straight, right, as we start to swing around her head. So even though she was wearing her hair down, she wasn't wearing a hair tie. You also need to be prepared that in a lot of textures, you may have a hair that's completely straight. You may have patches that are completely straight. It may be the result of overstyling, sure, but also it could just be where that lives on her head, and it could be straight. Having a mom with stick straight hair, I have some parts that are super straight. And my dad had the coarsest, tightest, coiliest hair, and I have that in other places. So I just got all the things. Now that I've worked through this back section, I'm going to start working up over the ears. Yeah? I love it.
Thank you. Do you ever have clients that feel like they have too much hair or their hair is too big? And how do you address condensing that for them?
Product is going to be your most effective leverage to condense the hair once you've given them a haircut where the curls effectively cascade into one another. A lot of the weird volume that people have is oftentimes because they have these disparate lengths and then they've got just hair stacking on top of each other. But once you get it to an actual shape of hair, then the curls have the chance to lay, right? If you think about even something kind of thinking about how you would move for doing scissor over comb, and as you keep working it, you see how that hair is able to lay easier. It's that same type of feeling I would equate it to as you're getting those ends healthier and healthier. The hair is able to lay in a much more comfortable way. So when you marry that with using products that are going to hydrate it and allow it to actually, the outer cuticle is not going to be all flared up and dry and sad. When we put those two things together, I think that's when we hit the jackpot, right? So if I look at my guide here, right, and this is very common, these corners are, I see them pretty much every cut where it was a straight cut before. So I'm looking for that guide, and then again, I'm being conscientious because I know that this is gonna probably be a pretty mobile piece of her cut because the area around here tends to be. So I'm just being more conservative. I'm not taking excess in this area. But again, it's very common that you're gonna see huge disconnects as you start to move up the head, right? And hopefully, you know, the goal is to, after a few haircuts, you get to a point where you don't have these disconnects anymore, right? Where you're like, sometimes I'll be working with somebody and I'm like, you remember that when that part didn't connect? And she's like, it doesn't, look at it. Look at what it does now. And it's like, yeah, it's awesome. Like, we come so far, you know? But that's another reason why I take a lot of before and after photos is it's very easy to, especially when you're at home with your own hair, to feel like you're not making progress. So I always like to show them, like, no, look at what your hair looked like the last time you came here or the first time you came here. And they go like, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much. And you're like, yes, yeah, like you really want to show them what a great job they're doing and reinforce that to them, because I really believe that that effort really needs to be celebrated. They don't get enough props for making a commitment to heal their hair. When I start to move around the perimeter here in the front, because I know I am sparse in this perimeter, I'm actually over-directing this towards the front because I know that I'm gonna want this cut to give me some more coverage around here. So rather than just letting this live out here, I'm kind of just giving it a little extra so that I really can start to visualize. And you can already see, and I'll start to spin her around, how she's actually got a shape of hair now. Like, we haven't even done the fun part with the water yet. And I'm just switching off between these two sides as I move up. And sometimes I'll kind of shake the hair just to see where it naturally wants to fall. Because in this case, there's actually some damage in here where things are a little bit straighter. So it's got some elasticity differences between here, here, and here. So I just want to make sure that I'm giving it ample leeway, because that's probably going to recoil a little bit different than its neighbor. I just want to leave it a little extra room. And it will be really interesting to see when we get to the water here next, what these areas that have the more pronounced damage, what they do when we get them wet. That's also, you can prepare a lot, but realistically, until you see that hair wet, you can still be in for some real surprises. I've definitely, don't get cocky. You think you know everything, and then you see your hair wet, and you go like, ooh, that's different. But you can usually start to develop indicators in your brain of oh, well, if it does that, then it's probably gonna do this when wet, right? And, you know, as I oscillate between these two sides, another thing that comes up is that most of the time people have more damage on one side than the other. So there's usually some difference between those two sides of hair as well. And I oftentimes will point that out to them so that they can understand. And sometimes it's because, you know, they're just touching their hair a lot on one side. Sometimes it's because they wear their hair on a part. Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you ask your clients to have no product in their hair when they come
I
in?
ask them to wear light product, and then I provide a list of what some of my favorite light styling products are on that area where I do the video.
Okay.
Yeah, because like Camille said earlier, if they were to arrive with some of these products like Eco Styler on their hair, I mean, we're not joking when we say like, you go to cut a hair and it's a trip, but it is not going to make for a fun haircut. And also it's going to make for some real challenges when it comes to just moving through the hair. Your hands are literally coated. Like I can rub my hands after a client and it's just chunks of wax and oil and sebum falling off. And then that means, okay, well, I know I also have to wash her 2-3 times, right? Which is, again, more time. So to me, it's not so much an issue of like, I don't want to add more time. It's that I don't have more time because I have a next person. So like, it's a being conscientious about that next client. Because I really hate when stuff doesn't run on time in a salon. I really feel like people's time needs to be valued. On the client side. And I think it's a real opportunity to give them not only a better experience, but to change that misconception of stylists as like, oh, this is just kind of willy-nilly. It's like, no, be there on time, be super prepared, make them feel very comfortable, you know, because they'll like, if you're uncomfortable, they can smell it on you. You know, like if, you know, you worked with a stylist before and they're like scared of your hair and you're like, I can tell you're terrified of my hair.
I had someone who had I didn't say it, but I kind of gave it a name. It was her black case or like the black client case.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, it didn't really have that much. It had a pig.
a pick.
And it had a spray bottle. She said she had a bottle. She was so sweet. She was so sweet. But she just didn't have everything that she needed.
The tools,
Yeah.
right?
Not like she would know.
Right.
So
What
it's
are
like,
some major tools you think stylists should have in their
Yeah, I think that, and I'll show you over at the bowl, but I think that you have to have some kind of detangling tool. My favorite is a toss-up between the Tangle Teaser and a brush called, well, it's created by a woman named Felicia Leatherwood, but the website is brushwiththebest.com. That's another very effective detangling tool. So those would be, you gotta have those in your arsenal. I do a lot of finger detangling, but I think it's really imperative that you have some kind of detangling tool. A pick. Picks don't have to be fancy, but you do want to make sure that their edges are smooth. So some cheaper picks will have the way they're pressed together. If you feel along the edge of them, they'll be cheap, right? And they'll have little nicks and stuff in them, so the hair can get stuck in that. My favorite brand when it comes to picks is a brand called Eternally in Amber. It's a small black female-owned brand. I think she's out of Philadelphia. She's got some really beautiful stuff. Clip-wise, so the clips that I've been using today, without question, are like so much better than any clip I've ever used. And these guys are by Vernon Francois. And he has a full hair care line for Afro hair, and I really like his tools. I think his tools are really nice. These clips, yeah, those ones are just my absolute favorite.
Would you mind turning her around now?
Sure. So now I'm coming to work in this bang area, right? And already, it's a trip. I don't know if you can see this way if I angle it that way. Just from building weight in the front here, as I moved up, even though we know there's not a lot of hair, this looks like so much more hair than those two little stringies that we had when we first were sectioning things out, right? So I'm taking everything to the stationary guide that I set, because I really want to try and hopefully build as much weight as I possibly can in the front, right? I want to take everything here so that it looks like I've got as much hair on my head as I can. Also, can I always cut hair to explosive? Like, that's just, it's like my dream.
Wait, what did you just say? Can I always cut hair to
Explosive.
Oh yeah, no, heck yeah.
West Coast.
Get into that flow.
That shit's
Yeah.
a bomb, explosive. This reminds me of the early 2000s. It was a simpler time. Ah, she said I wasn't paying bills then. I was. They were just a lot less bills. That's a fun part, right? Just keep tacking them on. My kid is 15, and she's so funny. She was like, is there a point at which you feel like a grown-up, or are you just winging it? It's like, I'm just winging it, bruh. Just trying my best. She was like, okay, that's kind of comforting. So like, nobody knows what's going on. I was like, yeah, no, babe. So as I come up here, do you see I've got this big shelf? And that's very common too. So oftentimes I'll have a deficit in here, and then I will have an abundance right here, because they do a lot of styling with this portion. So folks will oftentimes keep it long so they can have more to work with. And sometimes this is an area where folks will start to get a little panicky, because they're like, oh, you're cutting it off, because they start as that juxtaposition between the length of this and the length of this. By the time you get up here and they see like a sheet, they're like, you're cutting off half my hair. And you're like, remember, babe, like this was just a random like hair turd that you had in the scheme. Like it's not, the rest of your hair was not this long, right? This one is kind of like this weird hair turd. It's not flattering. And, in terms of how frequently my clients come, I like to tell them, if I can see you once every 4 or 5 months, that's a great place for us to start. For some who wear their hair in a more short or tapered look that needs to be maintained more frequently, sure, I'm seeing them more regularly, but those are oftentimes the folks that are doing like an express cut, right? So they can just come in, get a little reshaping, and be on their way.
Do you, you're talking about clients who it's 3 years, 5 years since a haircut.
Yeah.
Do you have clients that can only come to you once a year?
I do. I have quite a few clients that like live abroad, and so they come see me, when they're here. And in that case, again, we just kind of go, okay, like what's our game plan? And here you can see, if I turn her this way, I brought up my guides from my 2 sides, here and here. And then that tells me exactly where I am done with that. Yeah? And then I can just let that cascade on down, right? Y'all ready for some food party? And that's perfect timing, because I'm just finishing up with this, and then y'all can have your nom-noms.
We were going to do it at 1, and then I was like, no, we got to do it at noon.
Do it. Do it to it. And I'm always real careful when I start to move into especially delicate areas. I'm just using my fingers to detangle at those ends. If anything is challenging, I don't ever want to tug. And, you know, you may use something to detangle your hair. I know the internet loves Denman brushes, loves wide tooth combs. What do you use when you're going to detangle?
I use the brush.
You use
Detangling brush.
a detangling brush, like a Denman brush,
And I usually
or a detangling brush.
detangling brush.
Cool.
But usually I'll in the shower I'll detangle it by hand first. And
Yeah.
then because I shampoo my hair in the shower and then I get out and condition my hair, part it, braid it. And when I'm braiding it, that's when I use the detangling brush.
It's a really interesting point, right? So the shower process becomes much more involved because she's got to get out of the shower, condition her hair, get back in the shower, and you start to go like, wow, that's a whole day,
Yep.
right?
I have another question. I feel like I've been seeing people talk about like brushing your hair, like for the health of your scalp. Do you recommend that for curly clients? Maybe like before they wash or anything like that?
I recommend they're using a shampoo brush and that they're massaging with their fingers, but I'm not recommending that they're using a brush. I do see a lot of the stuff about it increasing circulation, and while I agree that, like, yes, manipulating your scalp and great. Also, I mean, sure, if they are using it to break up sort of detritus on their scalp, sure, it can be used in a sort of scalp treatment method. So I don't think it's a bad thing inherently, but I think that with most of my folks, they are not at a place where I can give them instruction like that and they will execute on it correctly. So it would be, I don't think it would be wise of me to be like, go out and get a brush and start brushing your hair every night, and like, because then we're going to end up with a new set of issues. Maybe if I've been working with somebody for quite a while and I know, like, they know their hair and they can easily navigate through it, yeah? Shape hair, check that out. So as I move around, and you can even start to see how now on the sides, if we're thinking about directing it this way, she's not going to have that hyper sparse area, right? We want her to have some fullness in here. Of course, it's not going to be the same as this, but also when it comes to styling, I'm going to have a lot that I can do to really encourage this from a styling standpoint, to lay in the right way. And when I say the right way, I mean in a flattering way that's going to look like she has the most amount of hair possible. And now I'm just coming through and making sure, because effectively it's almost going to, because of the damage up here, it's almost like she's going to have built-in bangs as a part of her cut. Get it. Yeah, and I'll sweep up while you guys get your food. So first I was saying, I dig your hair. This is a cleansing cream. This is more of what folks would think of when they're thinking of a traditional shampoo. Like the feel of it and the look of it, the foam, the hand feel, that's more along these lines. Oftentimes when I'm working with somebody for the first time, I'm using this as a solo, or I'm cocktailing it with this, because this is going to do more of that chelating, that clarifying action, and a lot of times they have a lot of oil, right, and residue. So when I'm coming out the gate, I'm usually using this. Sometimes if their hair is incredibly dry and it doesn't have oil residue, I'll go straight to my cleansing cream, because this also does a magnificent job at keeping things clean, but it's slightly more hydrating. Yeah? So, but they both marry together really well. So once I see how the water touches it, sometimes you'll see me like kind of cocktail these two guys. Now conditioner, this is my AG Naturals Boost conditioner, the companion for that guy. AG Naturals is like 98% plant-based. I used it for quite a while before I moved over to using I Dig Your Hair, which is just, again, a clean soup, like a hyper clean line. But this is very nice, and I like it as well. A little bit goes a long way. And I think that this is it's either a split between one of these two in terms of what my clients like to use for their sort of daily drivers at home. And then I have my conditioner by I Dig Your Hair as well. And this guy, which I can't open right now, but I'll figure it out. That guy, another where a little bit goes a really long way. And I do have some clients that use that as their styling product. That being said, not all textures would choose to use it as their styling product because you need to think about that as more like a leave-in, so it's very soft. So if you need more longevity or hold or firmness, this is not gonna be your answer. But if you're dealing with somebody with like Sasha's hair, right? I could use this because the curl porosity is gonna allow me to like actually get in there. It's gonna be nice and juicy. But if they had hair with a more densely packed cuticle, I wouldn't choose that because it just wouldn't get in there well enough to give them any kind of styling that was worth more than a day. Yeah? And so I'm gonna move over. Is this gonna be okay for me to put this here, or is that gonna be in the way of the camera? Okay, cool, sweet. So in my bowl, I've also got my tools that I was talking about earlier. So I don't know if you guys wanna hand these around too before I get going, but this is my Tangle Teaser. This is the handheld version. I like this one because it's very easy in the shower or in the bowl to have control over this while my hand is wet. So I can just knock it out, and a lot of my clients like using it in the shower for that reason too. This is also a Tangle Teaser, just with a different handle, so I think that that's just like ergonomic preference, yeah? And then this guy is the brush with the best brush. So if you guys wanna hand those around and start to take a peek at what those feel like, yeah. And then if you wanna lay on back, babe, how's that gonna feel? Do we wanna get another towel for you? Is that gonna be comfortable enough?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Where did you get the brushes?
The brushes, the Tangle Teasers, I both do at tangleteaser.com, and Felicia's brush is at brushwiththebest.com. The Tangle Teasers, I always tell people, like, just go on to tangleteaser.com, like, after a holiday, and get, like, a Valentine's Day one the day after, because it's going to be half price. I'm all about strategery. And one thing that's interesting, so I just turned on the water now, and I'm just gonna start off by getting her hair wet. But one thing that I wanna point out, let me get my, oh no, that was right. I felt it, cool. So as I'm getting her hair wet right now, I don't know if you guys can see, but the water beads up on her hair, yeah? As I get her hair wet, it starts to expand, yeah? So her hair isn't actually really receiving much of this. It's just kind of gliding off of the outside, probably because of that oil content, right? I always am telling guys where they're like, I want the oil to hydrate my hair. And I'm like, what do oil and water do? And they're like, they repel one another. And I'm like, right, so awkward, you know? So I show them this and I say, look at what your hair does when I put water on it, right? And we see these little beads of water forming. Get in my zone. Don't make me get in my zone. So now, and I'm making sure that I've got everybody thoroughly wet, because it's very easy, and it's like I've had so many times where I've gone to the salon and they kind of like wash the outside of my hair. And they're not aware at the degree of density on the interior, so it's very easy for them to just be like, okay, well, it's done. And I'm like, you missed a lot of stuff in there. So I always am very conscientious of parting all the way down the middle, even at this stage where I'm just getting it wet, right? Like I really want to make sure I'm getting in here. Is that temperature okay for you, babe?
Yeah.
Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cocktail together a pump of my I Dig Your Hair and a pump of my AG Naturals. I'm just gonna emulsify that between my hands, and then I'm starting off on my hairline. And the cool thing about cleansers like this is they actually have a ton of slip to them. One thing that we were talking about earlier when she was saying, she was like, oh yeah, like, I mean, I use cleanser, but my hair doesn't feel like moisturized. It feels like clean. What they mean is it feels stripped, right? So I always like to show people that you can actually have hair that is clean, that doesn't feel like straw, right? And it's crazy because even though I'm just doing this for a second, do you see how already her curls are starting to pop out? And sure, I could be using a tangle teaser or something like that, but instead, I'm just using my fingers, right? And now that I don't have those ends that are hyper damaged, I can really just start to blow through everybody. And so in areas where it seemed like there was no curl pattern, now all of a sudden you're starting to see very defined curl patterns. A lot of the time I will take a clip with me over to the shampoo bowl. And because you're gonna be at the shampoo bowl oftentimes a bit longer than you might have been in other, situations, I always really wanna make sure that my bowl is very comfortable for them. I have a bowl with a neck that flexes, which can be really helpful. But I make sure there's pillows and all that kind of fun stuff too. So even if you guys come up or come look quickly, just at this side of her head of hair versus the other side where I haven't gone in and washed, do you see how already we're starting to be able to see really defined curl patterns versus this side where it seems like there's not really a pattern, right? But here, we're starting to see those curl groupings.
And is that because that cleanser has broken up the oil?
Exactly. So they were saying, is it because the cleanser is helping to break up the oil? And yes, it is. And you can see, I put a pump of each on my hands and look at how much lather I have, right? So again, not having to use tons and tons of stuff in order to get a result. And also, I'm always going to be re-wetting my hair as I'm doing things. How's your scalp feeling? Feeling okay? Cool.
I can literally feel the difference on both sides.
Yeah? And the cool thing is, by doing it this way, I'm setting myself up for success so that by the time I get to conditioning, it's gonna be a cakewalk because this is already detangled. I'm not like, okay, now. And I've seen that a lot, people that go in and just hit that scalp, and then you end up with this like rat's nest and you can't completely draw your hands all the way through, right? I'm gonna come around on the other side real quick.
Is that the main reason that you do that then?
Is
So
to,
that it, like also focusing on those ends and trying to get the product build up, but also to keep it, oh, sorry. Do you want me to repeat that?
yeah.
Is that why, hello? Oh. Is that why you are starting, like shampooing it that way through the ends to remove the product buildup, but then also detangle it?
So it's a double whammy. So I'm able to detangle, I'm able to remove buildup all the way from the roots to the ends. And also I'm just manually smoothing that cuticle in the direction in which it grows for this entire time, right? Yeah. So that's also really helping to set me up for success. If I get to an area where things feel challenging, I just use my fingers to really delicately work that out. And you can start, even this front that was stick straight.
At any point, will you go in at the scalp and like massage it?
Yeah, so when it's a new person, I start off working like this until I feel that I can move freely everywhere, and then I go in, right? So I really start like, okay, cool, let me get everybody clean and happy. And then when I have a head that I can comfortably move through. Oops, that comfortably move through. I said oops because I accidentally squirted some conditioner into my hand, but that's never a problem. It's like never a bad thing.
And the I Dig hair is a conditioner?
So it's a full line. The cleansing cream is what I used first. So I'm using the cleansing cream now combined with some of the AG Natural shampoo. So I'm using them together. But if we'd been working together for say 3 or 6 months and her hair was no longer full of some stuff, right? If she had been using better products for a while, I would be aiming to migrate her to the I Dig Your Hair stuff over time, because I find that I have to use so little of it and my hair just gets so healthy over time when I use it that that's just a really strong return on investment. And I like to make it as easy for them to find things as possible, because that's definitely a hurdle that we're up against with textured hair. Is it can feel like, where do I even go to get this stuff? You find a lot of like cult brands online, and it's like, that's cool, but like it makes it very hard for somebody to get super into a good routine if they run out of stuff and it's going to take them a ton of time to ship it, right? So it's like always okay, how do we find things that are easily accessible, that are clean, right? So now that her hair is all detangled and everything, now I can like really get in here and work on that scalp. And this is the kind of like, and I always tell them, I'm like, granted, I'm really getting in there and washing your scalp today, and it may take a little bit longer than they spend washing their scalp at home. But I always remind them, like, if you do a little bit more every time, that means that you have to eventually do so much less, Spending that extra 2 or 3 minutes is gonna mean that in 2 months, this is a cakewalk and you use half as much conditioner and half as much cleanser as you used to use. And when I'm rinsing, I always, use it as an opportunity to reinforce to them that when you're in the shower, you want to be looking for clean water, right? You want to be, when you're rinsing your hair, especially if they're using any of these kind of cream-based things that we're talking about. I think that that's sort of the user error component about these lawsuits, et cetera, that is getting missed, right? If we're not teaching people the best way to use and cleanse their hair, it doesn't really matter what they're using. They can still screw it up because they don't know how to use it and how to really make sure it's rinsed well. So what's crazy is, even though I've just washed her hair once, look at the difference in how her hair is receiving water now and how much easier it is for me to get this hair wet, right? When I rinse it, I'm always looking at the water in the bowl because I want to make sure that I don't see any suds or residue. Olaplex treatments are also a fantastic option for curly hair. Especially if somebody is coming from a place of more damage. I always reinforce to them that, like, while this will not return your hair to its original texture, it will help marry together the varying textures that you have. And so for a lot of folks, that's enough, because they're like, it makes it look like I don't have 8 textures while it grows out. But I always really am very adamant about reinforcing that. Now, a lot of us are accustomed to losing a lot of hair when we wash because a lot of these products don't have slip that they're using. But I keep a hair trap so that I can show them, like, okay, we just washed your hair, like, that's what we lost.
God, that's amazing.
Because normally it's handfuls and handfuls and handfuls of hair that they are accustomed to losing. And it's not because it's falling out, it's because it's breaking off, right? So if I can show them, like, see, if we get something that has good slip, we can still cleanse you. But we're not, we don't have to strip everything off, right? So I'm gonna go in with my AG Boost conditioner. And that's another thing where, like, often with conditioner, they're like, oh yeah, I have to use, you know, like a mountain of conditioner, right? And I'm just starting off by smoothing this on the outside of her hair. And I'll also, you know, again, part down the middle. And I'm making sure I'm just getting things everywhere. And then, now I have my choice to either, you know, use my hands, or I can come through with something like my Tangle Teaser, right? And I can start to do some detangling that way. But the cool thing is that there's not really detangling, right, to be done, because that all happened already. So now I'm just able to smooth her conditioner into her hair, and then she can be on her merry way, yeah? In terms of like the cleansing and stuff of it, just because, gosh, I can't tell you how many people are like, well, first I no poo and then I did, you know, it's like, what's the one I'm thinking of? The first I wash day wonder, and then I pre-poo, and then I no poo, and then I low poo, and then I just feel for them, because each of those steps takes time and is not cheap, you know?
Hey, Kia,
Yeah.
I don't know if we've touched on this, but how much do you charge for your
Yeah.
3-hour haircut appointment?
Yeah, so I base it on length, because the dry time, that's what really eats up that extra half an hour, or sometimes even hour, depending upon their hair. So I do $195 for shortcuts and $235 for hair longer than 6 inches. One thing that has been interesting when I moved to that model is that a lot of folks book appointments for hair shorter than 6 inches because their hair looks shorter than 6 inches in one part of their head. And, you know, I try to catch that on the intake form in those photos. If I don't catch it on the intake form, though, that's okay, because when they get there, we can still have that conversation before I'm cutting their hair or charging them anything, so that at the end they're not like, wait a minute, you said this, you know? So while we're going through it, sometimes I'll, in order to delicately kind of frame it, I'll say like, oh, it looks like your hair's like, oh, are we doing a shortcut today? Did you wanna, you know, is our new cut gonna be short? Right? Because that way they go, oh, no, I want to keep this as long as possible. And I say, okay, cool. So your hair is 9 inches long now, and I'm going to be cutting off 1 inch. So we're going to have about 8 inches of hair. Does that feel cool to you? And then they don't get as dicey about that as I think they might if it was just a, hey, surprise, this is what you're getting charged at the end kind of deal.
Quick question about the length. So is that with the curl stretched out?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it says that all over my website. It says curl while stretched.
Okay.
Because, yeah, just way too easy to have a miscommunication there.
What about your express cuts?
The express cuts are $125. Yeah, I think that it's really helpful to break it down to to figure out what you need to be making hourly for things to make sense for you. And then you can start to build out from there depending upon how challenging the work is, or how much of a luxury service it is, or premium pricing, or you want me to come in on my day off? Okay, cool, it's gonna cost this. You know, you can start from there. But yeah, and you know, when I started off, my cuts were $95 for a curl cut. It was regardless of the cut, regardless of the length of hair, regardless of what we were doing, $95 if I was with you for an hour and a half, or 3.5 or 5 hours, or if your hair was tangled or it wasn't tangled. So over the course of time, I really had to work up to a place where I could justifiably charge that, but also reinforcing to them what they're getting for that, right? So And I have one client who he's growing his hair out, and he used to wear it short in a fade, and he's like, I don't know why people give you a hard time about your haircut length, because I used to go get my haircut at the barbershop once every 4 weeks, and it was $45. I actually pay less to come see you once every 4 months than I did when I was getting a fade. And like, nobody complains about going to the barbershop, right? And I was like, thank you, buddy. But I say that because it's even interesting as it relates to product, I think. Because when a new line comes out and people have $300 to spend on a new line that is not vetted and we already know isn't gonna work, but they don't have $200 to spend on a haircut that they know works, that's on them. I used to carry a lot related to that and be like, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. That's just their personal choice. That's where they're at. That's what they want to spend. You're going to have people who bring up the fact oh, I wanted to come see you, but it's expensive. And you go cool, so are your nails and your eyelash extensions and your new tattoo and those Timberland boots I'm looking at. Life is expensive, right? What is your priority? Right? And try to do that in a nice way. Oh, cool, I saw you went on vacation. That's chill. Your hair wasn't your priority, but also don't complain if your hair is busted because you chose not to cut it for 2 years. Right? So it's how do we say that in a diplomatic and kind way? Right? If we look at her hair now, do you see how this looks so very different after just washing it once? So now we can actually start to see these patterns if you come in here. So even with nothing on her hair, when she washes it for a month, right? What happens when she starts using good things on her hair all of the time? How quickly will we see these changes? Pretty freaking quick, right? So now that I've got her nice and washed, I always tell people, when it comes to styling, you want your hair to be saturated with water. Some of my clients prefer to do that in the shower. So they'll bring their gel in and they just do the whole thing in the shower. They have their little towel so that when they're done with their hair, they kind of just wrap it around, dab it off, dry off their body, and they run, right? They don't have time. Others want to spend more time or get out of the shower and kind of do their hair in front of a mirror. I always, especially when first meeting somebody, take them back to the chair after washing it. I don't apply their styler here because I want them to see me applying it, so they can be like, okay, that's what she did, yeah? So that's what we're gonna do today. I've got her washed, conditioned. Now we're gonna head back over to the other chair so you guys can see how I apply my styler. Sound good? What I'm gonna start off with doing is, again, going back to square one and coming back to my perimeter. And it's so fun now because I'm like, this is so easy to part through. I just oh, boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. Because I'm going to be working my way from the bottom into the center in terms of styling. Granted, I'm going to be doing a super sort of meticulous job today, but I always tell my clients, you can figure out a way to do this based on any amount of time that you have, right? Some are real, oh, I just kind of run my fingers through it and go out on my merry way. Others are much more, no, I want to do very section by section, but I always remind them that spending a little bit more time applying your styling product means that your hair is going to look better for longer, which means that you're going to have to do less, wet it less, and use less product, right? That's one misnomer, is I think a lot of people are trying to use less product and they're half-assing things, and then they're finding that their hair doesn't last past a day, so then they're using more product, right? Where I'm like, no, think about how much you're using per wash, right? So I put a pump of my gel. This is a aloe-based gel by Uncle Funky's daughter. A lot of the times what I do when I'm at home is, besides keeping a spray bottle with me so that I can keep my hair nice and wet, I'll actually mix my gel in a hair color applicator bottle with water, and I'll do it at a 50% dilution, so that when I'm applying my gel, it's already diluted down a bit for me, yeah? I took this area over her ear, and I'm just smoothing this under her curls. And do you see, I'll turn here. And this area that a second ago looked like this, clean but with no definition, right? Now, looks like that.
And you're not getting it all the way to the root.
Correct. And a lot of clients ask me about that as well. They're like, how come you don't put it on the root? For me, it's personal preference. I find that because these products are liquid and viscous, they're going to move anyway over the course of drying down, so that they're going to migrate up a little bit anyway. But also, it's very easy to put way too much stuff on your hair. And when people are putting stuff all the way up at the root, a lot of the time they're just leaving it on their scalp, right? So they just end up with a ton of like gel on their scalp, and they're not saturating this evenly. They're just ending up with a ton of stuff on their scalp. So I caution them away from it. But like I said, I also err on the side of using a bit less than I know a lot of my colleagues do. If I wanted to, I could be using my Tangle Teaser to comb through my product, right? So that I get a nice even saturation. I can then follow it up with my fingers too. But again, that's more of a personal preference thing. Do I want to use my fingers? Do I want to use my Tangle Teaser, right? I can use either just my gel alone, or I can use a foam to pair it with. So the AG Naturals foam, one of the reasons I like this so much is I find that for folks that have this consistency of hair where the surface texture is coarser and the cuticle is firmer, I think this foam does a nice job at sort of dissipating the gel, so it is really nice and evenly distributed, but it also helps things to dry down a little bit faster, which is great. And it may seem like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to use, a lot of product, but it evaporates for the most part, but you can see the difference even in length, visual length, between a hair that has product on it versus a hair that does not, right? Just trying to get that up there so you guys can see. And sometimes I will even I'll marry the gel together with the foam in my hand. Some people I have one colleague who will marry a bit together in her hands, and then she'll put it in a little hair color bowl so that she can just kind of dip into it. I know some folks that will put it on their comb and then comb it into the hair. I know some folks that put it on the back of the hand, almost like you would if you were doing having a cream bleach and you were painting that way, So a lot of this is what works for, bless you, a lot of it is what works for the individual person and what feels most comfortable for them. And again, as I move around and up the head of hair, I'm just giving things an extra little spray down. Grab this guy. What products have you guys found when you're working, or, and for those of you that do work with curly clients, what have you found that you like the best? What has done the best job for you in your practice? I'm always intrigued to find that out because I play around with a lot of different stuff, but I like to hear what other people are into. For styling? Yeah, for styling.
I definitely love Curly Magic. I love Curly Magic, but I also love a lot of the Inner Sense.
Yeah, which ones are your favorite?
As far as styling, I like the I Create Hold. I usually use it for someone with a smoother surface texture.
And that's their gel.
That's their gel. That's also aloe based. And then I like their I Create Volume for finer texture.
Yeah.
But I also will layer it on my hair on top of Curly Magic. Yeah.
I tried that. It's good stuff. Yeah. Have you ever used Inner Sense either? Yeah. That's another fantastic option on the market. And it's cool that they're Bay Area based as well. So we can already see this perimeter of her hair, right, as completely saturated. Now, I'm just going to start working my way up. What's really important as I move, because the perimeter is oftentimes, like, that's kind of easy peasy, right? That hair, the surface texture tends to be significantly smoother and more receptive to product, so it oftentimes is kind of easier to just blow through that. It's really important as we move up and in that we're hyper aware of having an even saturation, right? I think that that's one place where a lot of people go very sideways, and they'll like do all the work all the way around, and then in the middle, they just have this little poof of hair, and they're like, I just don't know why this area, you know, recoils or fill in the blank, right? But the cool thing is that, like, this hair, even though it seemed very, very shrunken, when I apply product, I can get it to look just like these guys, instead of this sort of half as long tuft, right? And it's just that smoothing. And I oftentimes will work like with a little towel at my feet. One thing that you may see when you're looking at curly videos that I do see a ton is a lot of styling that involves the client doing a lot of moving. And I understand why certain brands and certain methods like teach to that, but I'm also like, I'm the child of a disabled person, and so I tend to be very hyper conscious of like, I'm not gonna ask you to come to the salon and then sit like this for 40 minutes. Because that's what a lot of like the curly hair accounts, if you follow them, it's like, she sits here, and then she sits here, and then they lay the back of the chair back for another 20 minutes. And I'm like, I'm not gonna assume that anybody's doing that. I'm also not gonna put somebody in a position where they think that they're obligated to do that, and then they overextend themselves. So that's why I don't choose to do that. Also, I just feel like I can get a really beautiful set without acrobatics. And I'm oftentimes like, I'll be rinsing my hands as I move around. But like, you know, if you just look at something like that, this little tuft looks like there's no hair here, right? Not the case. It's gonna pull out and be the same length as the guys next to it. But it can visually look very fooling, right? Where you go like, wait a minute. And it's in a case like this where I'm gonna say, okay, I really wanna go in and take a smaller section this time. So if something seems like, something's different in this area, that's when I'm gonna be really, really aware of taking slightly smaller sections that I might have taken somewhere else, right? But you can tell that this hair performs differently than that. It's just inherently different. But before, there was no curl pattern at all, where now we're starting to see quite a defined pattern. So one thing that can also be kind of shocking to clients as time goes on is they'll be like, I was really surprised because I left my appointment and then my hair kept getting curlier. And I'm like, it's not that your hair kept getting curlier, it's just that you started using different products that were better for your hair, and so your hair was able to retain moisture better. And so they'll like leave and it'll be like a month out and they're like, oh, my hair is so curly, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't set it on a delay or something. It's not like a crock pot where I was like, after she leaves, set it to curl. But it is very cool, especially when you start removing length. By not having that excess length, it also really allows these guys to jump up and get moving. When you're styling curly or textured hair, do you guys tend to apply that while the hair is super saturated with water like this? How have you been taught to go about doing that? Yeah. Not, no?
We have another comment.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, when I started using Diva Curl products, whenever that was, maybe like 9 years ago or something like that. And yeah, styling the hair super wet was something that they had taught. But now at this point, like I feel like I kind of am like, yeah, I don't know which way to do it.
Yeah. If I were to try and style hair this tight without this degree of water, well, we wouldn't be seeing any of this. Like that just wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it just depends on
Yeah.
how tight the curls are.
See, I tend to, even if it's a looser curl, I'm still saturating it completely with water. So, and the way I frame it to clients is like, your hair is at its curliest at this point. So like, let's let it dry down when it's in that shape. Yeah, the Tangle Teaser is very cool. Same with Felicia's brush, because I feel like, again, the multi-purpose nature of these things, right? So like, I can use it before I get in the shower on damp hair to detangle, so that when I get into the shower, my hair is already detangled. I can use it to comb my conditioner through. I can use it to comb my products through, right? Like I want to have things that can do a lot of different stuff. Questions?
If you were styling a much looser curl,
Yeah.
would this Curly Magic be something that you would use? Maybe not.
I actually love that question, because the Curly Magic, I think, is one of the coolest products on the market because it applies to so many different curl textures, densities, surface textures. It's really one of the heavy hitters on the market. It's very unfortunate that we don't have more choices, especially in the professional sphere, right? So if I walk into Cosmoprof or Salon Centric, I just don't have a lot of things that I can use. And that can feel very isolating, because like, I know like I'm in some like business coaching groups and stuff, and they'll oftentimes be like coaching to how to sell retail and how to do this. And I'm like, that's cool, you guys have 87 different lines to choose from, and I have to buy everything at cost with no discount, and I'm and it takes more of it per service. So like, I can't use the same numbers that some of my colleagues can as a baseline, because the work that I'm doing dictates that I have to I can't just go out to a supply store and get more gel. I have to plan in advance if I want to get stuff. So like with the I Dig Your Hair, I sell it at the salon, and also she has a website where she ships it directly to consumers and stylists. But I can't tell you how many times I've found something and been like, this is cool, and then it sells out, and then the company folds, and then you just never see it again. Because it's very hard for them to gain any foothold in the market with the big brands carrying as much weight as they do. And like some people had mentioned earlier, when something gets really big, it usually gets acquired. And then you can hope that they keep their formulas. But realistically, we all know that that's not normally what happens. And that's definitely an area where a lot of, especially like black hair care brands, have really run into some struggles there. Brands like Shea Moisture that had a very devoted following. And honestly, you guys, it's really important. like a lot of us have encyclopedic knowledges of like Orbe, Kevin Murphy, you know, like we know all that stuff, but it's really important that you get informed about these different lines so that at least when your client says, I had a blue bottle or a brown bottle, you'd be like, design essentials? You know, like, you start to be familiar, and that's gonna breed so much trust. If a woman walks in looking like this hair and you say out the gate, like, have you tried Miel? Have you tried? And you start, like, they're just gonna be shooketh to a degree that they're not gonna, they're just like, what, you know? You know? So that's gonna really be a big buy-in. I would really suggest that. Like, even if it's just sitting on Google and doing some basic research about, like I said, even going to Target and looking what's on the shelf, reading the ingredients of what they are, looking at the terminology that they use. Do they say this is for a certain texture of hair? That's very common as well. A lot of people think, like, you know, to kind of speak to the can you use Curly Magic on other textures, I have a lot of folks where it's like a mother with children or siblings or sisters or aunts, and, you know, they're like, oh, we all have to use different things because we got different, and it's like, well, yes, in some cases, but a lot of the times, like, no, you guys could all just buy a bottle and use it. And that's actually one of the reasons that Dominica, who created the line, my former salon partner, her family is a mixed family, and she was like, this is ridiculous as like a professional stylist that nothing performs similarly on all three of us or all four of us, you know? When I get up to the top of the head, I can guarantee that I'm adding more water, not just on tightly coiled hair, but almost every client. Like when I'm up into this zone, that's when I am for sure getting out my spray bottle. And one thing that's interesting to note while the hair is still in this state, if I turn it to the side. So even though we know that this hair was cut to the same length as this after we got it wet, do you see how much this recoiled in, right? So if she wasn't using the right proportions of stylers and laying that in the right way to get that set appropriately, she's gonna look like she has this snatched in 4x4 area in the back of her head, which is oftentimes when people arrive at the salon, that's what they have, is they come in and they might look like this in a couple of places over their ears, but up in the back, they have this very seemingly coarse area that just doesn't seem to match everybody else. But again, we can divert that. We can reroute that, right? So now I'm just coming in, and again, I'm taking finer sections as I move up in here. So this is about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch deep, where sometimes, and you know, it might be an area over an ear, like I could take the whole chunk and just knock it out. But usually it's up in this mohawk area that I really have to be very conscientious of smaller sections. Using a spray bottle can also be really helpful because it can show them how much less water they can be using than they are using currently. So I have some clients that prefer to actually wash their hair before they get in the shower so that they can do that while standing kind of, again, in front of the sink in the bathroom. And I just tell them to keep a towel around their shoulders. But for people that have a lot of struggles with getting thoroughly clean or getting all the way through their hair, or they might say like, you know, I just have such a density of hair, I can never get all the way through it. That's when I say, okay, cool, then part your hair in front of the bathroom mirror. Use your spray bottle and your cleanser to wash your hair so that when you get in the shower, all you're doing is rinsing and then conditioning your hair. Because a lot of the times they're popping in the shower and they're like, okay, now I gotta wash it. And then 45 minutes later, they're like, oh, it's kind of washed. My arms are tired, so I'm moving on to the next step. Like that's not done, you know? But they're just exhausted from having used so much energy that they kind of just give up ship at a certain point. And usually the area where they give up ship is here. So over the course of time, it just gets drier and drier and coarser and coarser. And so then they start to think like, this hair is just not the same. But you can see that by using water and product, that area that was this long is now everybody else, right? Just looks like everybody else. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's fun to show people and kind of like leverage the mirrors where you're at, you know, to kind of show them as you're moving up, or even taking pictures and being like, check this out, or I'll take a video and show them. And it gives them a chance to get excited and be like, what? That's what the back of my head looks like? You know, because usually they go like, oh, let's just not think about it back there, right? I'm so cute today. I don't really want to know what the back of my head looks like. Like, that's not fun. I want people to know that they look good all the way around. And sadly, I think that the fact that people can't see the back of their heads is sometimes something that is leveraged by unscrupulous stylists to do damage back here. That happens a lot when it comes to flat irons and things like that. Braids, I oftentimes see more breakage, like they'll braid harder in the back. They turn the iron up in the back because they know she ain't gonna see it. She's not gonna know. She's gonna feel like, oh, something's wrong back there, but like, I don't know. So yeah, it's very common that I see this sort of scenario. And I always am making sure, like, and I tell them, you know, like, I want to be able to feel through very smoothly and have no like kinks as I do this, because if I'm doing that and I have kinks, then that's just gonna basically like cook in a kink into their hair. It's cooking in a knot, you know, whether that, and I say cooking meaning drying down, whether that be air drying or diffuser. For those of you who do diffuse or use a blow dryer, what types are you liking? I know that that's definitely a conversation as well. I played around with the Dyson, but didn't love it for my own work. But I always am interested to see if you guys like found anything that you like or that you feel like does a good job. You'll see my hooded dryer in a minute. It's my best friend in the whole wide world. But yeah, what are you guys into?
That I really like. I don't like my blow dryer, so if anybody else has input, I'd be interested too.
Yeah. Don't love the blow dryer. Man, that's practically criminal as a hairstylist to not like your blow dryer. Mine's actually right here if anybody wants to grab it. I really like that bad boy. It's the handleless Paul Mitchell. And because a lot of the time I'm spending a decent amount of time blow drying, I want to be really conscious of being careful with my wrists and all that fun stuff. So yeah, you can unplug it and hand it around. So the blow dryer has the Diva Curl diffuser attachment on the end. Of all the diffusers I've played with in life, it's definitely my favorite. That one that you're gonna see here has the universal attachment. So it's got an elastic band, which means that you can slip that onto the end of any like professional dryer. They do have like a dedicated blow dryer that comes with the diffuser, but with a hard end, so you can only use it with their stuff. So I'm always like, no, get this one. Because that way you can just travel with it, and if you're shooting or doing stuff on site, it's very easy to work with that one. And that Diva Curl diffuser, and I'll even show you on my own hair when I plug it in, but the difference between the airflow that I get with direct air versus that is pretty remarkable. And because it has vents on both sides, it really easily allows me to just kind of slip it into the interior of my hair or my client's hair. And so for me, like if I'm running behind and I only have a few minutes to get my hair a little bit dry in the morning, I'll even hit at my root with my diffuser. And then I can go on my merry way knowing like, okay, my ends are gonna dry relatively quickly. It's really those it's really that interior, like you know that, like it's the inside that takes like 80 years to dry, it feels like. And if it's taking super duper long to dry, the unfortunate side effect of that is that they're walking around and their hair's moving and this is drying and that's not drying. And so by the time everybody is dry, places like that little area in the back have had a chance to recoil back in because you didn't almost like flash dry them real quick enough, you know? So when people, like you were talking earlier about people being concerned about their hair getting too much volume and getting too big and fluffy, if it's that conversation with somebody, that's somebody where I'm telling you, okay, then I would invest in a hooded dryer. And I would think about having a routine that allows me to wash my hair, take no more than 20 minutes, and then sit under my hooded dryer for 20 minutes so that you get that initial dry taken care of. There are some other foams on the market that I've played around with, and I wish I could say that I had found others that I really liked, but I haven't thus far. I'm always on the hunt for another foam or gel that would perform in this way, but it's not a lot of options. But in time, I think we'll continue to see things get better and better. Just got to give it a little time. I mean, gosh, if I think about even in the, decade that I've been in the industry, it's completely different. I mean, like I told you, I got told there's nobody that wants to wear their hair like this, in 2013. But clearly there's at least two of us. We're in the room.
I heard also in London, people with curly hair are now a trend. Like they're looking
Yes.
for a lot of actors,
Yes.
models, whatever.
Absolutely. And that's another thing for those of you who are interested in like travel or the potential of doing that. Like if you can do textured hair, you become invaluable. You become like, oh, do you want to go to Paris for a week and just book clients and style them and pay for your trip doing 5 heads of hair? Cool. There's so much opportunity. And even though you might not think it, like I have a ton of clients who split their time between here and like Nigeria or South Africa, and they all express that in Africa they cannot get their hair done naturally. It's all wigs and weaves and braids. And they're like, man, if somebody could move to Africa and do natural hair, they would be a billionaire, but the fact that when they go home to Ethiopia, they can't get their hair done, and they have to come to California to get their hair done, like that's deeply disordered as well, right? But, I remember when I was in beauty school and they said like, of course, like don't talk about politics or religion or anything. And I was like, well, but if you don't talk about why black hair or in turn textured hair, right, is looked down on, then we're leaving out a really big part of this conversation. We can't just like pretend that nobody knows how to do this hair because it's just like happened that way. That's like a systematic thing that was made, like this was taught, or we taught that this was undesirable for generations. So now people think it's undesirable, right? It's not like it's, you go into a cosmetology book, there's no education on it. So I try to explain to my friends, I'm like, and I didn't learn anything about this in beauty school, sadly. I wish I could say I had, but I did not. Now that I'm coming up around to our newly fresh and sexy party bang area, we have some decisions that we can kind of make like with the client. And I like to kind of let them determine to an extent what they want to do up in the front, because a lot of the times, like if they are very wedded to one side or another, which we already know, like if you do anything other than that, they're going to be like, Even if they like the rest of the haircut, if their bang is on the left and it's supposed to be on the right, they'll be like, it's okay, but like, my bang's supposed to go over there? And you're like, no, it's okay, we can move it, right? But in this case, like I was saying earlier, and if we think about from the top of the head, So I'm more parting out on an axis, thinking of like a point in her head. If I was parting on a side, sure, I could leave it to a side, but because I want more coverage around these areas, right? Instead, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be positioning her hair like a bang. Because it is a bang, it's gonna be a little mini bang, but if we do it in the right way, it can still look nice and full. And sometimes I have, like at my salon, the little like forehead guards for like color and stuff. Sometimes I will use those. I'll put those on their forehead so they don't end up with product sitting on there. But you can see I'm letting these guys go forward, right? So I can help fill some of this in. And up at the top of the head, oftentimes I'll do a slightly zigzagged pattern. So you'll see that I'm taking diagonal, like forwards, right? So then I'm oscillating between the sides so that as her hair dries down, we don't have like a finite line. There's nothing else about our hair that has a line, so like why would our part line be this? I mean, okay, like if that's a look, cool, but a lot of the times they're not doing it because it's a look. They're doing it because they're like, that's how you part hair. And I'm like, well, but our hair doesn't grow like that, right? So this way they end up with what appears to be, as it dries down, a much fuller head of hair, but also a much more organic way that it parts. So that if, you know, the wind hits you from one side, cool. Hits you from another side, awesome, no biggie, right? And at this point with my client, I say like, all right, cool. Now I'm gonna have you hang out under my hooded dryer. And what do you think, guys? Would it be better for me to dry her in here or dry her out there? That way we can talk while she's drying. What do you think?
What do you think?
Well, the sound of the dryer is pretty low. I don't think it would cause much disturbance, but
I think we can stay in here.
cool, perfect.
Yeah, we usually blow dry in here.
Perfect.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can kind of see from up top, but even if you can tilt your head down a little bit for us, do you see how everything's oscillating out of that point, right? Go ahead and tilt your head back. Beautiful, perfect. So now at this point, if my hair was still drippy, and this is oftentimes like what I do when I get out of the shower is I just like take my little, you know, I just am kind of like dabbing off my little ends, but I want to make sure that I'm not dabbing off all the product that I put on. I see that people do that all the time where they'll spend all this time beautifully like saturating a hair with product and then they're like, all right, well, and then I just go in there and I'm like, no, baby, don't, right? So for me, I'm really more so like getting areas where it seems like it may be pooling because I don't want it to do that at all. Perfect. So now I'm going to bring my hooded dryer in here and I'm going to sit her over there under the hooded dryer to kick it for probably about 20 minutes and then I'll check it. Yeah? Give me 1 second to set that up. And I always tell them like, hey, if you can't feel the air flowing through anymore, wave your hand at me because I stay in the room with them, right? And it is funny a little bit to me because I get people that are like, oh, is your assistant going to wash my hair now? And it's like, yeah, my assistant Kia is going to wash your hair now. Like, but I think because they're so accustomed to being handed off that they get really stoked when it's like, no, I'm going to wash it, and I'm going to style it, and I'm going to dry it. There's no other person. Not that having an assistant is bad, but I think that it's all about how you leverage having that assistant so that your client doesn't feel like you're handing off the hard stuff to them. Because that's something that definitely gets voiced a lot. Is they're like, I feel like all the washing and the styling, like the part that took forever, like that's what the like junior person did. And the stylist like kind of shaped my hair and then came back at the end for 10 minutes and I gave him $400. You know, and it's like that to me is not, that's also not a model where anybody's gonna come back and see you. And I tell friends, I'll tell them what I'll, you know, it's all the same story, but if somebody doesn't like the cut that you gave, they're probably not going to tell you. They're just not going to come back. And I think a lot of us as stylists, it's easy to forget that. Like clients, because I hear about a lot of bad experiences, I ask them like, so what did you do? Or did you raise your hand? Or did you voice your discomfort? And they're like, no, I just went and cried in my car. And then I never did it again. I'm like, did you write on Yelp? You know, like, did you do anything? But they're just so mortified that they just kind of go, and I just never went back. So to me, I would much rather see somebody once every 5 or 6 months and have a very low maintenance routine. And that's fine, you know, like I don't need you buying this and that and coming all of the time. I also recently switched my model so that I'm no longer offering color for a period of time. I don't think that will last forever, but I was finding that I was getting really quite frustrated because with our hair, it's such a delicate balance. And everybody wants to be the same. I joke, but I'm like, if I had a buck for every, I just want it to be a honey blonde, like Beyonce. You go like, what else about your life is like Beyonce? Like, you know, like, I just want to have a mansion, like Beyonce, you know, like no big deal. Yeah, I just want to have a $50,000 coffee table, like Beyonce. But they all wanted to be this shade of blonde that the amount of work required to get to that shade of blonde was a lot of work. And not only is it financially a lot of work, the amount of time that would have been required of them, not only to get the services, but also to do the maintenance required to keep that up. A friend likened it to the difference between, if you have textured hair and you want to be a blonde, it's like owning a Maserati versus owning a Corolla. You got a Corolla, you change the oil, man. You get new tires, you're good, right? But when you start going into Maserati territory, like you have to be conscientious of the premium gas, you have to be conscientious of the treatments, you have to get it waxed, all this extra stuff where it may seem at first glance like I went on Instagram and I saw somebody who turned their hair from Kia into a light lavender unicorn in one day, and so I know it's possible. Do it. And you go like, yes, it's possible, but that doesn't mean that I'm gonna do it. So yeah, I had a lot of people over time that were really adamant that they wanted to be blonde. Then I would get them to blonde, and then they would immediately say, you know what, I kind of feel like I want to be a brunette again. And we've all been through that, the transition of people wanting to tone or et cetera. But when it's taken you 9 months to a year and a half to get somebody blonde, it's a very different, you've put in so much work to get them there, to have them only say, you know what, I feel like I have to do Olaplex treatments and this is just work. You're like, yeah, that's what we talked about a year and a half ago when we started this. You know, so for me, the answer to that was taking a break from color for the time being. But for those of you who do color, I would strongly advocate for not accepting any color clients when it is their first time visiting you. If I can impress anything upon you, if you do color, avoid putting yourself into that situation. Give yourself a chance to work on their hair and really understand their foundation. Send them home with some instructions of how to care for it, and then see if they are in a place where they're going to put in the amount of work required to have their hair lightened. A lot of people will tell you, oh my God, yeah, no, I'll be here all the time. You don't see them for 3 years. And they're the same people that were very adamant while they were in your chair 3 years ago that you just had to make them blonde and they were gonna be the best, most vigilant at maintaining their blonde. So really get to know a client. I still have a couple of blondes where I'm like, it's not on the public menu. I still lighten your hair, but these are people who for 4 or 5 years I've seen their patterns and their at-home care. And I feel really confident that if I lighten you once every 7 months, that's what we're doing. I know you're gonna take care of it and you're gonna get your hair cut in between. So just be aware of that. I feel like my most uncomfortable moments were oftentimes around color even almost more so than cuts, because the expectation was so far off. Even articulating it to them and feeling like I was really clear and showing them, you know, like, here's where you are on the color chart, here's where we're gonna get you to, I feel like they too often were disappointed. And a lot of that is just the impression that we give about how easy lightening hair is and what the costs of that are. And, you know, it's the old meme of like, you know, what's the picture of the two heads of hair, and it's like, I got it done cheaper. You know, I found someone cheaper, and it's like so busted. And you definitely, you know, I've seen that too. It's like, I found another curl person that could get me in that same day. And now my hair's messed up. And you go like, well, that's because, that's why they had so much availability. But I always, you know, not to discourage people from working with new people, but I always say, like, did they have a portfolio? Did they have any examples of hair that looked like your hair? Or were they willing to talk to you about how they thought they could help your hair? Yeah? Mic check.
On that note, as someone who has like a handful of curly clients,
Yeah.
and you scaring me with
Yeah.
with the stories of people getting their hair messed up,
Yeah.
how do I segue into, you know, not messing up people's hair?
Yeah, and I struggle with the same, because even though I do this all day, every day, I still get a lot of people that come to the salon and look at me and say, your hair isn't very tight. Your skin isn't very dark. What are you gonna do? You don't got this. You don't know what I got, right? So I get that a lot. I think that in those cases, if somebody comes to me and like I can tell from jump that they are like really, really mentally in a space where they're kind of convinced that I'm gonna suck, I say, why don't we do a wash and go? I'm not gonna put any scissors on your hair. I'm just gonna wash, cleanse, and style your hair and give you a chance to see what I think your hair can do when we use good stuff. If you like it, then you can set a next appointment for a cut if you feel like you trust me with that. But if somebody comes, and that happens, I mean, they'll book a cut, they'll get there and they'll talk my ear off for 20 minutes about how I'm gonna suck, and I go like, you know what, today's not a cut day, we're not doing it. I have no hesitation to do that, because the times when I didn't, they weren't gonna be happy, so they're looking for somebody to blame, usually, for their past neglect of their hair. So I was like, to me, it's like, if I just wash it, and I take a picture of it before and after, that's very concrete proof. It looks better after. So if you cut it, that's when they start to go into the like, you said 1 inch and it was 2, and it becomes very gray area, where if I just do a wash and go with no cutting, I feel like it's a nice introduction for them to me to understand my process. You know, I'm not for everybody. That way they can kind of get to know you and, hey, I'll just wash your hair. And then you can kind of share some product knowledge with them, show them like, yeah, no, I know what's going on. The other thing that I would suggest doing is, you know, with your curly clients, or if you have colleagues that have curly clients, to develop a portfolio of demo models, right? So even if it's not haircuts to start off with, just doing before and after shots of how you can style their hair. If you have a photo book of 10 before and afters, you're gonna be ahead of 90% of the population. I can't tell you, so I do an experiment once a year where I call all of the salons in San Jose that identify themselves as curly specialists, or having a curly specialist. And I go on Yelp, I search for curly hair or natural hair, and then I call each salon and I ask them, you know, I say, I have this hair, I'd love to visit and get a haircut. Do you have anybody on your team that styles hair and cuts hair curly? And then if they answer yes, I say, awesome, can you link me to their portfolio? And if they say no, then I say, thank you so much, and I hang up, right? Each year, I find that it's only about a quarter of salons that even say they have somebody in-house who's familiar. And then when they do say they have somebody in-house, usually it's only like a quarter of those where they go like, oh yeah, here's her website. Oh yeah, here's his Instagram. So usually you're being asked to walk in completely blind. So even if you literally had like 5 people on your site where you're like, look at these guys, that looks like your texture. If you had like a wavy, a curly, a coily, in short and long, that's 6 people. And that is more proof than most people are giving. Even people who do this all day. Not everybody who does this all day is documenting themselves or makes that a priority. And I know it's hard to make it a priority. I struggle with that myself because I'm so busy doing the hair that I'm not photographing the process, right? Where there are others that have an assistant just for that, right? So I think that that's a cool way to leverage having other people in your salon or assistants in your salon is like have them tape you, have you do tutorials, like let people see that you're not afraid to touch this, you're super comfortable, you're jovial, and then they'll be like, oh my God, I looked at her page. She's at a salon of 10 people, but like, look, she's got 5, like they're there. I know she knows how to do it. And that's enough for a lot of people because folks will go to see somebody with no proof, none at all, or bad examples. I hear that too, where like I had a girl last week where she was like, yeah, I found somebody online, their examples were terrible, and like all the reviews were that they were really bad, but you know, we went with it, and now my hair is so bad, and I'm like, it's hard, again, and you go like, that's, but yeah, but she cuts curly hair, and it's a salon that's been a curly hair salon for 10 years. I always say, if it's a curly hair salon, zoom in. What do those curls look like, right? And even to bring it back to what we were talking about with wigs and things like that, I am always zooming in. My poor clients are so tired of me being like, zoom in, like a CSI. I'm just like, enhance, enhance. But because when you look at somebody's pattern up close, if it's incredibly uniform all over, I go like, that's suspect because nobody's hair is uniform all over. So you start to ask yourself these little questions, and then you can point that out to your clients as it relates to influencers that they love, YouTubers whose hair they love, models who they're like, oh, I just want my hair to look like hers. It's a wig, right? So the more knowledgeable you are, that will go so far. Yeah, I have friends that do this work that do not have curly hair, that they're just really great at it because they went out and got super duper informed. And sure, the ramp up is more challenging, but we're in a unique position right now because there still aren't a lot of people that know how to do this. So you still have an opportunity to get in front of it. In another 5 years, I don't know that that will be the case. Because eventually, if everything goes well, people will be learning this stuff as the global makeup changes, right? Like I see, where 5 years ago there was nobody, now I'm like, oh, there's 2 salons in London. Oh, there's 3 in Rio. Oh, there's a guy in Paris. And right now our networks are so small that like we know each other, like we all are in this little loop of curl stuff and we're all familiar with each other. So it's a really cool opportunity. You can kind of, not slide into the DMs, right? But you can position yourself around people that have a lot of experience, and oftentimes they're really willing to share because they're just so happy that somebody else is joining the team, right? They're like, oh, you want me to tell you? Sure, no problem, let me tell you. I'm super grateful to folks like, like Christy Ramos of Sunflowers and Scissors. I remember, Kristen Brown, Curl Factor down in Santa Barbara. These are people who like, I saw that they were these little islands doing this work. And I was like, well, if they can do it on an island, I can do it on an island, even if I'm not in a big salon. At that time, I was literally fresh out of school. Like I had never done anything. And so, yes, it did start off with one client, 1 day a week, but in 3 years, I had to stop sharing a salon and now have my own salon because of like my personal schedule, I have a couple of different things that I do. So I make music in addition to this. So I'm only in the salon 3 days a week, but if I wanted to work 7 days a week, I could. I could be booked out 7 days a week, 4 or 5 months in advance. There's that many people that are hungry for this work. So if you guys pursue it and have that as another tool in your arsenal, it's just real positive, not only for the communities in which you work and the clients that you serve, but also for you as a stylist. It really, it can really do some awesome things and make you stand out in a very crowded field right now, because there's a lot of folks, right? You go on Instagram and it's like, oh, a lot of it looks the same. You go on Discover, right? That's pretty, that's pretty, that's pretty, that's pretty. Oh, that's different. And if you can get yourself into that different niche, that's a good place to be, in my experience. So far, at least, yeah. I'm using my blow dryer to go through and help any spots that I feel that are still slightly damp. This is also helping me to start breaking apart the different curl groupings. One thing that I hear a lot of the time in the salon is like, I'll do someone's hair and they come in and they're like, it's really poofy, I don't like it. And then I do it and then it's very compact like this. And they go like, it's really small, how do I make it bigger? And I'm like, cool, I like it, I'm into it, I get it. But I always want to reinforce to them that I want it to be compact as it dries. If it's compact as it dries, that means I'm drying in these curl patterns. Once it's at least 85% dry, then I can start moving it around. And that's when I can start building definition. But I need to building volume, but I need to build definition before I build volume. Like you were talking about with the other day, walking up to somebody and they're like, I don't know why it's frizzy. And you reach in and you're like, it's because it's still wet. And it's getting moved around while it's still wet. So if we can avoid that, that's awesome. But it's so happy. It's like, I love just seeing these. Oh, they're so pretty. I find that the area over the ear can oftentimes take a really long time to dry. So if they're sitting under a hooded dryer, a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll have them, hang out under there 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'll come in, I'll open up the hood, and I'll ask them, okay, shake your head around. And then I'll put them back under the hood, right? Because that lifts things and gets that air back going under, but it doesn't, again, it doesn't require them to do a lot of moving around. They're still just sitting in the chair, But I'm like, okay, flop it. And then I'll let them finish drying for the most part. And then I'll kind of walk around and do this initial little blow dryer work just to make sure, like when I'm feeling around in here, I'm all up in your zone, feeling for any damp spots. And that is also going to get me to a space where I can see like, okay, what does this look like when it's 90% dry everywhere? Because I'm still going to go in and do a little bit more refining of her cut. And I could definitely do that now. I could wait for it to get completely dry. But also there's a lot of times where I go in while it's still, 5 to 10% damp, and I start doing my refining then. And when I say refining, I specifically mean going around and doing any dusting of curls that have shifted during the washing, taking care of any ends that look like they still have some areas that aren't able to recoil. So in the bang you're gonna see here in a second, there are a few places where I feel like, okay, well you just don't curl anymore, right? I do, like I was saying before, I do really like doing Olaplex treatments, especially in the bang and that crown area. It can be a really nice reset for people. And some, I feel like when folks come in, a lot of the time they're like, I saw like that there's an Olaplex treatment, so I'm gonna get it. And I'm like, what do you know about it? And they're like, I don't. But that just goes to show that like people will purchase a treatment if they think that there's something that's going to help them. So it's really important to be clear to them that, like, by doing this, it's going to help, but it's not, we're not going to take you back to virgin hair. We can't ever do that, you know? Because I don't know about you, but like, I'd be really stoked if something improved my hair by 50%. But if I thought it was completely gonna fix my hair and it only did 50%, I'd be like, this sucks, you know? Like, so it's all about how you frame it.
Hey, Kia.
Yeah.
Why are you using the blow dryer without the nozzle?
Yeah, because I like using this to separate the hair, right? To actually blow these curls apart so that I can get some size. If I were using that, yes, it would be drying it, but I wouldn't be getting volume because it's not trying to blow things around. And I always show my clients too. I say, like, look at what a blow dryer does to my hair with no nozzle. Look at what it does to my hair with a nozzle. So it's not, you know, sure, I could use it in here, but her interior is mostly dry. So I'm more so building volume right now by moving this around. Also, I find that when hair is almost dry, this to me does a better job at finishing everything up than if I were just using a diffuser. A diffuser allows some of those curl groupings to stay in their groupings on purpose, right? That's what it's there for, but I want to break them up. Yeah.
Could you mop them out with the diffuser?
Sorry?
Could you mop them out with the hand diffuser? How you would?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you mock demo with the diffuser?
So if I, for example, hadn't been using the hooded dryer and I was just using this, oftentimes I'm grabbing a section and I'm just placing here, right? And I'll hold it for 10 seconds. And then I'm gonna find another easy natural split. Put it in here, right? Hold for another 10, yeah. I can also sometimes in the salon, I will show a client, I'll be like, hold on to my blow dryer, and I'll have her hold it from the front so she can kind of test out putting it in. That way she can see. But yeah, because there are vents on both sides, it's very easy to just slip it in and get that nice and dry in the interior. So that's how you would, right? Reach up and feel it. Tell me how it's feeling. So what her hair has right now is what we refer to as a gel cast or a cast. The cast just being that slight degree of firmness that happens as the gel or product dries down, so it develops sort of a film on the outside. One of the most critical parts, though, about having a gel or any kind of cast, cream, whatever, the products that form casts, I want to make sure that I'm using something water soluble, because if I'm not, that's where we go into danger zone. If I'm using things that develop a film and I'm never really getting that washed off, right? It's like cream-based, 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 never washing, cream-based, cream-based, you know? And if you think about the order of operations that most of the brands teach about how to apply product, it is wash, like we said, wash, condition, and then it's apply a leave-in, apply a cream, apply a gel, apply another styling cream, apply an oil. So it's so many layers that by the time they're done and their hair is dry, sometimes people are telling me they have 6 or 7 things on their hair, and yet they have no definition, and their hair isn't shiny, and you can't touch it, right? But that's what happens when lines have 8 new things that they release every spring, right? And I'm all about innovating, but at a certain point, I think it's just repackaging. Because if you look at those ingredients, 9 times out of 10, you go like, that's the exact same, but with just a different scent added right at the tail end. So they don't perform that differently. And the more I move it, the softer it becomes and the more full it becomes. And that's always something that I think is fun in the salon is after I'm like finished, I always tell people like, go play with your hair. I want you to mess it up and move it around because we want to see like, what does this do when you move it, right? But they're always shocked at the fact that their hair can move or that they can touch their hair. Because a lot of the time when you leave the salon, it's like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't you dare touch it. You can't get it wet. You can't touch it. You don't want the wind to hit it, right? Like I see, you know, videos of people after they get their hair done and I was always so jealous because they're just like, yeah, like the pony videos, right? Where people are like, they're so into it and feeling themselves. And like, I watch my own clients reach up towards their head like this. It's so nice. It's so nice. And I'm like, no, girl, I get it. But that's because they have never done it before they haven't ever touched it without it completely getting totally screwed up, you know? I'm like, no, I want to be able to sleep on it and play with it and, you know, do all the things everybody else does. I don't wrap my hair. So a lot of my clients like using a silk pillowcase instead of a bonnet or a wrap. When my hair gets really, really long, sometimes I will use a silk scarf. And like, if you think of it like the big triangle fold, yeah, and I'll kind of wrap it around the end, or around the back of my head, because essentially I want to be like Marge Simpson. Like I want it to all be like, whoop, right? My hair, if I were to, and some of you may be familiar with the term pineapple, but that's a very common one in the curly hair community. And that's where they plop their hair up on top of their head while they sleep. Good idea, but if you have hair as tight as mine or tighter, if I'm taking this hair and pulling it to here to sleep, when I wake up in the morning, this hair is gonna be straight and hanging down here, and it's not gonna be cute. So that's why pineappling doesn't work very well for tighter textures. Unless you are multiple pineappling, which is what a lot of my clients do. And that is just, I have one gal and she's got just the most beautiful, dense hair, so much hair on her head. And she was like, I just make 6 ponytails. I make 6 little ponytails every night. And then in the morning, I just take off my little ponytails because she's only doing these little poofs. Right? That way, when she takes out her poofs, it all is one big poof. And this wasn't trying to get all the way up to the top, right? So that can be one really easy way that you want to help people preserve their length, right?
Oh my gosh.
I hope that's a good oh my gosh.
Yes,
Good.
oh my gosh.
Good. Yeah, I love that question. So as it comes to sleeping, I just say go sleep. Wear a silk pillow, have a silk pillowcase if you got one. Cool, if you don't, it's not the end of the world. One of the most pivotal parts is making sure that your hair is completely dry before you go to sleep, which is where something like that can actually come in really handy for clients. But I know I have a lot of folks, and not just people with like wavy hair, because it's definitely like, okay, you know, you plop it up and you get your little wave going. But I have a lot of girls that have this textured hair that are like, I tried to go to sleep and plop it. And I'm like, there's no such thing as plopping it when you have this texture, right? If I were to if she went to sleep damp in a towel with a hat, I mean, we've been hanging out for a few hours. You can see what would happen. It would not be flattering to her, right? Instead, I would much prefer to leverage, again, leverage products in the right way when it comes to day 2 styling. My favorite for day 2 styling is actually one of the products that I showed you when we were over at the bowl, and that was the Form Beauty Multitask. It's labeled as a leave-in lotion, and it's really fascinating because like a lot of curly products that I've found, the way you are instructed to use them on the bottle is very different than the way that I like to use them in practice. So in the case of the Form Beauty, which I'll grab in just a second because I want to show you how I use it on her hair. With the Form Beauty, it says wash your hair, condition your hair, get out of the shower, spray that liberally all over your whole head, comb it through, then apply your cream or your gel or both, right? If I used it like that, I'd be going through a bottle all the time, but also I did try using it when I first got it. And when I did that, it did not marry well with the styling products. So I ended up with flaking and chunks and funkiness. I think we've all probably seen some version or have heard some horror story of like, you know, you put a styling product on somebody's head, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but those of us who do curly hair, we probably have, but it will start to coagulate on the client's head. Have you guys ever had that happen? So it happens oftentimes when you mix curls and something that's more, or not curls, creams and things that are like a serum consistency. So there are a lot of brands where like if I leave conditioner in the hair, and they'll tell you that, right? Like leave a little bit of conditioner in the hair. If I do that and then I follow up with the gel, the proteins in those do not mix, and I literally end up with like, looks like little gelatinous balls. I would encourage you to, if you have like Diva Curl in your salon or access to it, you can take the conditioner and the gel and you can smooth it together in your hand and you can see it bead up. That's what I'm talking about. So I always tell my clients, if you are playing around with something new, if you're using a product you've never used before, always try, if you're marrying things, try that out in your hand first. Mix it in your hand. If it's funky, don't put it on your head. Because I can tell you so many times that people are like, I just applied this to my whole head and then I had to start over because I got to the last step and then I had chunks of Jell-O in my hair. Not cute. Not cute.
Kia, can you explain what you're looking for when you're cutting now?
Yeah, I would. I would love to. So if we look at a hair grouping like these guys, I don't know if you can see where I'm at, right? I'll take this guy as an example. So even though this area we know has suffered some damage because of the just the manner in which she'd been wearing it, right? I can see that there's a very clear point right here where things fall off. Do you see? I don't know how much we can zoom in, but this curl has all of those different splayed out ends that I was talking about before. If we were to like diffuse an end, or if this is what curls look like that have been razored, curls that where somebody came through with a texturizer, right? Or, you know, texturizing shears, same deal. So they look like that. If I grab this curl grouping next to it, I want to look and see where these live, in relation to the hairs around them, right? Because I'm also keeping in mind, like, okay, around the face, I don't want to go too ham because I know I've got these areas that are kind of sparse, but I can very clearly see there's an area at which this hair just kind of gives up the ghost, right? And that's where I'm saying, okay, now that I've gotten a chance to see this wet and dry and wet and dry, now I know, okay, cool, you're ready to go. I've given you all the love I have to give, and you're still not forming a curl pattern. That means to me that it's time to go home. We love you, we appreciate what you've done, but your time here is over.
Is there a specific part of the curl that you're cutting?
Absolutely, so I like to cut And I had kind of mentioned this before. If I kind of grab a grouping so we can see. So if I'm going in and cutting, there are multiple points at which I would kind of cut depending upon what we're doing, right? But I want to make sure that I'm cutting at the termination of a curl pattern, right? So they sometimes will be C's or S's. There's a lot of different shapes that curls come in. They sometimes are in ringlets, right? But if you pull them out, essentially they are all some form of this in varying shapes. So if you think of them as like C's attached to one another, I like to cut at the end of a C, right? C, cut, C, cut, C, cut. That way I always have a very clear end of a curl grouping, right? And when I'm going through, obviously today the cut, that was more of what we would call like a cut on transitioning hair. But if I had a client that I'd been working with for a long time and they knew how to do a wash and go and they arrived with their hair like perfectly styled and ready to go, that is actually how I would be doing the haircut to start off with, right? I would be going through and curl grouping by curl grouping. I would be looking for each group and saying, okay, where are we done? Okay, where does that go, right? And that's how I typically would cut curl by curl if somebody's hair was there. Today we weren't there yet. So now that I'm at this stage where I'm coming through and refining, it's like at this point is when I get to do the curl by curl stuff that it wouldn't have been as easy. It wouldn't have been as easy to do that before because I couldn't see what the groupings were, And there have been times where somebody arrived and their hair was so damaged that I had to say, okay, because they tried to give themselves a wash and go, and even with that, it was just a degree of damage that was more than we could really work with. So I've said like, okay, we're gonna actually start off washing your hair. So I wash it and set it first so I can actually see what's going on in here, and then I do the haircut. I only do that probably 5% of the time, but I reserve that for situations where it's like somebody who's driven out, they're really trying to do their best, but they just didn't have a lot of guidance, and so they need help executing, but I'm certainly not gonna say like, you've gotta go back home and reschedule. I'm gonna say like, we're gonna make this work. I'm gonna figure out a way to help you today. Only based on length, not based on texture or density, just length. Yeah. I think that a lot of us are used to being upcharged for our texture. And so to me, like it really does, I spend the same amount of time regardless of the texture. It really is the length. It's that blow dry time that's what makes me stay longer with somebody. That and or if their hair is really dirty. So by changing that intake process, I've found that I can at least get their hair much cleaner. So that cuts, there were times in the beginning where I was spending an hour and a half at the bowl, easily. And I would feel so defeated at the end of the day, just like physically defeated, in addition to being like, I just didn't do the best job I could at that hair. It was the best job that I could do, but like, you're just muscling through that bowl work because their hair hasn't been washed in 6 months or a year. So by saying like, I can't do that anymore, you guys need to do that, and putting the onus back on them, that was one of the biggest game changers in my business. Like scheduling and giving them clear instructions like that. Those were two of really the biggest game changers for me. I couldn't still be operating the way that I was. It was just not efficient. Now I'm looking at the back just to make sure that we have no more, because before we had a lot of jumps in length, and now I'm just taking a peek from all sides. And then in a second here, I'll have her stand up, because I always, like I was saying before, I always want them to stand up and shake it around, because I want to see what it looks like when they are living in it. Yeah? Here, go ahead, babe. I'm going to have you stand up for me. And then I want you to just shake your head. Yeah? Yeah. Fun. Here, let me scoot this back a little bit. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Yeah, right? Check that out. Cameraman's got you. Perfect. So I always have them, oh no, it's okay, go ahead and stand up for me. I always have them stand up at the end because, well, obviously, you know, we know when we're sitting down, there's always shifts in the body positioning, and it's very easy for them to kind of sit one leg or the other, right? We always kind of lean. So I always have them stand up at the end so that I can really walk around, get a chance to make sure I'm loving everybody from every angle. And also picks can be our best friend. I don't know if you guys have ever played around with picks very much. Yay. Picks are great. And I like to show them how they can use a pick at home. And oftentimes what I'll do is I will, and even if you, like, let's look at this guy, right? Doodle-doo-doo-doo. There it is. Do you see how, let's see if we can get this one. Do you see how right here, we're done, and then everything gets sparse in there, right? So, right, and now we have just super juicy all the way to the end. So that's what that's what you're looking for, right? That's what we are, that's our end game, is that's what we're trying to have, a whole head of hair. Like juicy happiness, juicy happiness. So what I'll oftentimes have them do is look down a little bit for me, perfect. And this gives me a chance to move things around, and in a more, I'm like, it's froze on froze up in this camera. It's like, whoa. So, like, let me get my fro out the way so we can see her fro. But this gives me a chance to just make sure that things are really even all the way around, and that I'm getting a really beautiful shape again from every angle. And then I'm going to come in the back. No, you're perfect. Right, and then I always like to get this off of them so they can get in there and like get her in front of a mirror, right? You know, have her.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. You did great. You did great. But yeah, get in there, play with it. This is, we were talking about oils earlier. I always say, like, this is my answer to the oil question. You can use oils in the right application. So because her hair is dry, because we're done, right? Now I can use this oil product with oils that are nice and soluble. They're not heavy oils, they're lighter oils. I can use these to essentially lock the good stuff in, right? But if I was using oil at the beginning, not helpful, right? But instead, I've got all this nice moisture in here, so I'm just gonna use a pump, whole head, right? There you go, if you wanna try that. And I like this, and I oftentimes will, literally, I'll do that, and yeah, it's like, yeah, it's different, right? So I will, and I show them, I say, like, on tomorrow, this is what I want you to be doing tomorrow, right? We're just, yeah, it smells. See, I told you, folks love the smell. It smells nice, but if you feel your hair now, feel how it's softer even than a second ago, right? So it breaks up that last element of the gel cast, yeah, that last teeny bit of firmness. And then if you sit back down for me, then I'll come back around and just kind of blow stuff a little bit. Make sure we're super cool. Because at this point, like, can't screw it up. It's in here. And now, like, we don't really see that perimeter. That's not where our eyes go. So, like, yeah, does she know? Do we know? Yeah. But does anybody else look at her and go, oh, you have some fallout there, you know? Like, it just, we're very visual creatures, so if we just redirect the eye's attention, you know, then ain't nobody saw nothing. And I think it's fun because, you know, when I get to this stage and I'm pretty much at the end, it's like the more I play with it, it's like the better it looks. That's fun to me because so often they're at that mindset of like, oh God, okay, it's done now. I got to just kind of sit on my hands. And so that's when I invite them up to go like, nope, you get in the mirror. Let me hand you the pick. You fluff it the way you want, right? And like my pick, the way I like to use them, is when I use it, I like to use them flat against the head, and then I go back and forth. Do you see what a difference that makes? Even on my own hair, right? Flat against my own head, back and forth. And then you can start to build height and volume. And what I'll oftentimes have them do, my hair will get real big if I let it, but what I'll have them do is I'll have them hold on to the mirror and I say bend at the waist so they can still see me, and I'll show them how to use it from the top so that they can see and feel what that motion feels like so that when they go home they can easily recreate that, But you don't, a pick is one of those things where I'm like, pick is cool, but you don't have to have it. You can just use your fingers, But a pick is a nice, helpful extra. What do you guys think? Looking at Kat. Look at you, pretty lady. Yes, yes. So we got to see it in the sunlight now. So yeah, that's what you do when you cut curly hair. Thanks, guys. Oh, yeah, the ability to touch your hair when you sometimes have gone 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years without, that's a pretty cool thing for people. Like, you will see people have those moments of like, holy macaroni, this is not just a haircut, this is something else, right? So that's a very cool gravy bonus when it comes to the emotions, where I'm like, ooh, I get to feel nice on top of all that.
Will you stand up for, just right here in front of this camera, just so that Brett can get, husband.
He gone.
Husband.
Who's bunned?
Wait. Oh, can you zoom in? Thank you for being here. All right, so this is the after, guys. We can clearly see how moved Taylor is, and how different her hair looks. And it was cleansed, and I don't know, I just very, very informative today, and seeing how you apply the products and everything. It's just such a major difference.
You like it, girl?
It's so
Move
shiny. It moves.
Yeah. That's always fun. I think a lot of us are used to it, like we do this and it's just like, I remember Little Mermaid style, right? When that came out, and all my friends would be like, and I just remember being like, don't. Like you could hear like wah, wah, like when I would come out of the water. But this is always to me where I'm going, I'm finally Ariel. I can finally do the thing, right?